This is the history of spaceflight and space technology. I'm Andy Chaikin. This is week 9, Apollo 15 through Apollo 17. Apollo 15 marked the beginning of a new phase of Apollo. Officially, Apollo 15 was the first of what were called the J missions. And the J missions included a upgraded lunar module with extra supplies for longer stay times on the moon, up to 3 full days on the lunar surface. The spacesuits had been redesigned and the backpacks to allow longer moonwalks, up to 7 hours or even a little bit more than 7 hours at a stretch. And the command and service modules had been outfitted with a new array of scientific instruments mounted in the side of the service module, including high-powered cameras and other sensors to observe the moon and its environment from orbit. But best of all was an entirely new spacecraft on wheels called the Lunar Rover. And in this picture you see Mission Commander Dave Scott, of course, veteran of Gemini 8 and Apollo 9, sitting in the left-hand seat of the rover. To his right is Lunar Module pilot Jim Irwin, a rookie, and standing next to them is the rookie command module pilot Al Worden. And they were very happy to be given a more ambitious mission, to have the chance to achieve more both around the moon and on the moon. Well, one of the most important aspects of the J missions was to kick the scientific aspect of Apollo into high gear, into a whole new level. And in order to do that, the astronauts had to be agreeable to working closely with geologists to prepare for their roles as geologic explorers. So on the right, you see Dave Scott participating in a simulated moonwalk at Taos Gorge in New Mexico. And in the middle, you see, actually that's the Apollo 16 crew led by John Young in the blue shirt there, and their backups, with Lee Silver, a Caltech geologist. You can see him there in the green long sleeve shirt with the blue stripes, and he's wearing sunglasses and he's pointing to something in the distance. Lee Silver was a very highly respected geologist, but he was also a wonderful teacher. And through the efforts of scientist astronaut Jack Schmitt, as you'll read in A Man on the Moon, Lee was brought in to help train the astronauts for their roles as lunar field geologists on the surface of another world. Now, there were other geologists, of course, working with the astronauts as well, people like Hal Mazursky from the U.S. Geological Survey, but Silver really did play an important role in tapping into the astronauts' enthusiasm and their natural competitiveness to make their training in geology part of their competitive nature to do the best mission possible. That they understood now that, you know, what you did on the moon is really what determined how successful your mission really was. And at the lower left there, you see Egyptian-born geologist Farouk El-Baz on the right, coaching Apollo 17 command module pilot Ron Evans in orbital geology, things to look at while orbiting the moon, looking out from the command module, things that you would be able to not only photograph, but very, very important for both orbital and surface work is visual observations. And as I say in the book, you know, this is something that kind of went against the grain for some of the pilots. Even, I think, Deke Slayton, who was a little bit skeptical of, you know, why do you have to spend a lot of time talking about the rocks when they're going to have them when they bring them home. Well, very important to understanding a rock's history and origin is describing its context. And that was one of many things that people like Lee Silver and Farouk Elbaz, of course, in lunar orbit, you wouldn't be collecting rocks, but you'd be probing mysteries that could only be explored in detail by a human eye orbiting the moon, and of course aiming those very high-powered cameras in the scientific instruments module in the side of the service module. This is where Dave Scott and Jim Irwin really sweated, literally, to prepare for their moonwalks in a kind of a technical sense. The Apollo Lunar Surface Experiments package, things like that, deploying the ALSEP. You can see Jim Irwin on the left practicing that. And on the right, you see Dave Scott working with a battery-powered lunar drill. And this was going to be used for the first time on Apollo 15. It actually had been scheduled for Apollo 13, but had been, of course, not realized on that flight since they didn't get to land on the moon. But these sessions were very strenuous. You can imagine how tiring it is when you're wearing those heavy pressurized spacesuits. And even though the backpacks were lighter than the fully supplied ones, because they were actually breathing oxygen through hoses, it was very, very hard work. And they got very tired. They lost a lot of perspiration, and later it was determined that they had lost some electrolytes, which led to both Scott and Irwin having irregular heart rhythms while they were working hard on the moon. Well, here's the rover, and you can see at the bottom there that the rover is completely folded up into a very compact package that would fit into a storage bay on the side of the lunar module. You can see the wheels folded up against the chassis. You can see in the center there is the instrument panel. And as I say, the rover really was a spacecraft on wheels. It had its own navigation system, its own communication system, and so forth. But all of this folded up into the lunar module for launch and to be transported to the moon. And then at the top there, you see some diagrams that show the astronauts what they would do on the moon, pulling on some cords to lower, like a drawbridge, lower the chassis. The wheels then pop out, and then they would lower this thing to the moon and start setting up the various pieces of equipment that go on the rover, like the television camera that could be remotely controlled from Earth, from mission control, and storage for geology equipment and so forth.